So, hi, and welcome to Idea Shots, where we'll be opening up about ideas for creators and marketers and drinking a few shots while we do it. My name is Tom, and today I'm joined by Daniella Capodilupo, working in social media, content, and influencer strategy for 8 years. So, you've worked at renowned advertising agency 22 Squared before, and now she's at Preply, where we work together. And that's where I've seen you build a data-led influencer strategy that when I first saw it a year ago, my jaw dropped to the floor because it was so precise and so strong in itself. And yeah, I really appreciate your creative outlook when I'm working with you and being able to learn with you all the time. And I understand you're calling in from Florida, right?
Yes, I'm calling in from South Florida, and likewise, I feel the same when we get to work together. So it's been awesome being brand side at Preply now.
Awesome. And yeah, so I guess in Florida it's quite early, and we've just been talking that it's kind of the beginning of Daniella's day, but it's the evening for me. So kind of an interesting mix of times to be doing shots together, but that's what we're going to be doing. Okay, so we're going to talk today about influencer strategies and kind of do's and don'ts and things like influencer ROI, and also checklists for people who are considering to create an influencer strategy or work with influencers, whether you're at a business or you've got an independent project for yourself. But first, we're going to do a shot. So that's how we start things off.
Let's do it.
Today I have Ruavieja. I've never drunk this in my life. Daniella mentioned that she's tried it and that it's pretty good, apparently.
I'm actually interested in seeing your opinion because I feel like it gets mixed reviews.
Mm-hmm. I've heard an interesting story like about the brand of this alcohol and the brand and one campaign they put out, so I explain it after we do the shot. But yeah, what do you have, Danielle?
I am drinking a tequila grapefruit shot.
Oh, that looks nice.
Yeah, it looks kind
of homemade one.
Yep, homemade shot.
Brilliant. All right, let's begin. Cheers.
Oh, that wasn't bad.
Nice, but it's kind of stronger. Fresher than I thought it would be.
Yeah. Okay.
So this alcohol, I was watching a campaign from them, and it was about how we have very little time left with the people that we connect with. So they brought people into a room who were best friends, and they asked them, how often do you see each other? And they were about once a month, maybe once every 6 months, some answers. And they did some kind of data analysis, and they said, you've actually got this much time left to connect together. And it was very little time, it was a few days sometimes. And I thought that was quite powerful. And it's the reason I bought this alcohol. So it really proves how like brand messaging can work for you to buy something.
Yeah.
All right. And so I wanted to talk obviously about influencer marketing, and many businesses I think are tentative to try this channel out. What would you recommend for marketers who are thinking about trying it but need to win over their bosses who are unsure if it's right for them?
Yeah, that's always the fun part and like challenge, but I always feel like it's like a fun challenge because you get to figure out how to build this thing that not many people are still like aware of, especially with these, I guess I shouldn't say startup cultures, erase that comment. But I would say essentially like just really doing your research and grounding your recommendation, like initially like in research. And when it comes to presenting like a plan and an option and strategy, kind of be able to tell a story, but also providing these, it doesn't need to be a bunch, but maybe 1 or 2 options, just to give them an idea of the possibilities of what could be the outcome of what you're activating for the channel, and just kind of know in your back pocket like what that one option is that you really do want to recommend and that you do want to lead strong with. But just again, like showing people are, a little bit wary about investing a lot of money. So kind of showing them with their investment, like the different types of approaches you can get and what type of risk comes with that, I feel like is very helpful and useful to have when you're speaking to especially leadership that is performance and database, like just being able to kind of show them that in numbers and what that equates into risk and potential, results. And as well as, so tying everything back to the number and just remembering and reminding like, the group that you have to start and test somewhere. So again, just like making sure you're grounding that, your initial hypothesis or test in the research and data. And then, with just an influencer or brand partnership, someone with that background, being able to put that creative strategy and approach of how you actually activate that, and then backing it up with the numbers and being able to show, what those potential, like the ROI would be in that case.
So would this mean that you would actually have to start working with an influencer before you can? So the pitch is kind of, hey, I'm thinking about doing influencer marketing, but first we need to try one and see what happens, right?
Exactly. We did that kind of with a random test that we haven't really, paid much focus on, but we decided to work with parents influencers for like the first test campaign that we did, but it was such a kind of easy one to move into because we knew that there was a market there. We knew that, parents respond well and are usually good at like DR type of content as far as like taking some type of action. So it was a great test for us you have to be able to establish what that process looks like internally if you're contracting these people directly, or if you're working with an agency partner and what that process is. So you definitely have to start somewhere to establish what that flow looks like and, getting a sample size of the type of partners that could work well for your brand.
Sure. And I think we'll get to it at some point, but we can talk about how leadership might be, it's going to be expensive, whereas it's not always expensive. And we've discovered that there's a really huge range, right, of how much you can potentially pay influencers for services.
That and the impact, because like we definitely know there's always that struggle of like we only get a certain level of the direct attribution that like these influencers are driving, but a lot of that is indirect and finding those other ways to actually show that, hey, like we tracked this fractional size of what the actual impact was that this influencer brought on behalf of their partnership into like the larger scale of how that impacts the brand long term.
Amazing. Okay, so you mentioned a little bit about how that works as a process. So we're going to dig into that a little bit and how, kind of step by step, what we would need to look at when we're starting a strategy when working with influencers. So what's your process or checklist when it comes to working with influencers, and what steps do you go through? What do you ask them about, and so on?
Yeah, I would say from very like high level, it's, we kind of at first kind of narrow in on these like type of profiles that we think would lend to the brand well and serve as like a good partner and extension of the brand. Then from there, kind of like the top level is, what's their numbers look like? So, and not necessarily follower count, but what's their engagement rate? What's their audience look like? Are they brand safe? And not necessarily in terms of like everything needs to be clean, but are they, skewing one ways in certain of their posts that might not be the best thing for us to align brand wise, as well as I specifically like to look at how many brand partnerships are they doing? Are they someone that's doing like a sponsored post, like every post that they do, which, sometimes those accounts do perform well for certain, I would say, industries or brand partners that they're working with. But, Preply specifically, I think you just have to have a good understanding of what it is that the influencer is going to be promoting. And in our case, it's very much, I look for someone that can actually tell that authentic story within their personal connection to language. And then you have, like looking, do they have any competitor partnerships that we might need to be aware of, or that would discourage us for wanting to align with partners, especially as like a new brand. It's helpful to get someone that's a little bit green as far as working with people in your industry, just so that they didn't see someone maybe like, Rosetta Stone or something, and then like 2 weeks later they're talking about it. And then other than that, just and specifically for what I'm looking to achieve, like I look at what their kind of personal or connection could be to language, whether that's being relearning, relocating, loving to travel somewhere that they visit often, or, they maybe their partner or their spouse and family, speaks another language or something like that. So I think those authentic stories, because it shows in the content that's produced as well. And what well.
Yeah, sure. Authenticity is so, I mean, you can smell a sponsored ad from a mile away with some influencers like, you've put out all of this content and this just doesn't feel like you. I just feel like they've just shunted it in there. Whereas sometimes they make sense, right? The brand aligns with the influencer that's putting out the content. Yeah. And what about, initially getting the interest or the attention of the influencer that you reach out to? So when it comes to, let's say, that first email that you put out or something like that, what does that look like? How do you grab their attention?
So I always say, like, I'm very good at stalking people's profiles and like getting more like insight into them. But I would say once I have a better idea of who I actually want to work with and I think could be a great like partner for the brand, I'll like always reach out and, introduce myself, what Preply is, and then kind of just lean into first, like, hey, I saw that you posted about such and such, or hey, I saw that you participated in, this one thing, or maybe I saw them pop up through another partner that I follow or another influencer that I follow, and kind of just making that personal connection to show them like, hey, I've actually like taken a close look at your page and I've put thought into, why I think you would be a good partner. And then just going into kind of high level, like, this is kind of what we have going on. I think this would be a great opportunity and fit for us. Please let us know if we can continue conversations. And I just kind of send that note before I even get into the nitty gritty of like the details and what we would specifically be looking to contract for. So just kind of establishing that upfront rapport with them and just connection with them. And then I think that also is a better way to gauge if they're really interested, or if their reply is really just like, yeah, I'm interested in another partnership to get paid kind of thing. So
yeah. And speaking of getting paid, when do you introduce that kind of bombshell? Does that come in like the second email, or and how much? Who sets the rates at that point? Do you put a proposal, or does it depend?
Yeah, so a few ways. I would say there are some people that once you send that outreach note, if they're interested, or even if they're like maybe partially interested, some people will just automatically send you maybe their media kit and it has their rates in it. So I'm able to even just gauge upfront what their prices would be. If not, I will then, like in my second email, usually follow up with the actual deliverables that we'd be looking to contract them for, what the details of that would be. And then depending on what my budget is for the current partnership or the current quarter, I tend to like to ask people first, like what their rates are. And I've just found that it's a better way to really gauge the influencer market. A lot of people are taking into consideration different things when they're formulating their rates. So I love to just get firsthand, like, tell me like what your cost is. Cause I think it's also important that we, by offering sometimes like a certain number or something, like I never want to like lowball someone, or it's just, I never want someone to feel like undervalued based on like the budget offering that we can give them. But if I'm presented with the rates, I'm able to then forecast estimations that like we have now kind of created internal formulas for, which is like, hey, this meets, the CPM that I know, like I'm approved to be within the budget that I have to spend. So maybe if it's an influencer that has like an average reach of like 250K, like that would, I'm going to mess up these numbers, but it puts you around like, I think somewhere around like maybe a $20-ish CPM range or something. And I know like maximum for partnerships, for this certain thing, like I'm looking around to not like go over $25 a CPM, for example. Or I could just be basing it on, sometimes there are like reach tiers, like as far as if you surpass certain, reach points, then like there's an increase in rate just based on the actual eyeballs that you're getting on your content. It's been a different way that I've done it like in the past, but it's been a very, I think, good way to like kind of reformulate what this like whole this influencer channel looks like, being performance backed. And so I would just say I asked for the rate first, seeing if it's doable within budget, within estimations, because again, I think people should be compensated like fairly for what their work is and what they're equating that to. And there's time that
Sure.
goes into it. But also, we would love to pay everybody what they want, but sometimes the budget just might not allow for it. And then in that case, we're able to, maybe cut back on deliverables or adjust things a little bit so that we can make it work within their budget.
Mm-hmm.
And then on the other hand, some people, if they don't know about their budget, then I honestly, I try to be as fair as possible. And based on their audience size and some of the numbers that they present me, I will run the estimations based on, I know what guarantees I need to stay within, and then present that to them as what their compensation is. So it's really different based on the partner, their size, and some other metrics.
Yeah, it's amazing how much you have to actually adjust depending on which stimulus or which inputs you've been given. Mm-hmm. And yeah, also amazing is, like I said right at the beginning, how data led it is really as a channel, and it is that you have to be as a manager for this channel. It's really impressive. So before we move on, let's do another shot. I think it's time. It's shot o'clock.
I was gonna say, I'm surprised my dog hasn't been snoring in the back. Normally, I feel like he's always snoring when I get to.
Yeah, I mean, in our calls, I can hear him sometimes. So
he's being quiet today. All right.
Cheers. Oof. Okay.
I don't know if I'm convinced that you like this.
No, I don't know. I'm not sure either. I mean, that my face has gone a new shade of pink at the moment compared to how we started. So yeah, but it tastes good. It just has a kick.
Yeah.
Okay, so with that second shot, I think we can let's try to brainstorm a little. So I was thinking, how can I work? So if I had a show like this, which I do, but let's imagine that I came to you and I said, okay, I want to start working with influential people, and I want to start working with influencers. How could I do that and start building connections to grow the show? Mm-hmm. What do you think?
I would first start by asking, who are your people? Who do you want your audience to be like? Your community, your tribe, whatever you want to define them as, but who are you really looking to get your message out to? Mm-hmm. I know a lot of times, and I even suffered from this, working on, smaller and startup things and on my own in the past, trying to cast the net too wide, when it's really, I think, important to kind of lean in on first on we have so many people on the data team that pull research for the different countries that we operate in, and just really understanding who your audience is, and then understanding kind of that gap and that demand that there is within that audience that you're not tapping into. So kind of, what with my question to you would be who are those people? And then where are the other ones hanging out? That maybe you haven't sourced or tapped into yet. And then from there, kind of just starting with a first objective, are you trying to grow, viewership or, people downloads? Do you want to get people to a site somewhere to collect their information for lead gen for a certain point to be repurposed? Are you doing a product type of launch? So then just after kind of understanding what your audience is, thinking about what is the first thing that you kind of want to be your goal and what you go after. And then just from there, I would say, as far as influencers, once you've kind of established that, I feel like you have a good idea of the profiles and the types of people that you want to connect through. And at that point, it's really just building your network. And I think that's what we do with influencer all the time. It's building the brand's network and community of influencers that are down to talk about your brand at any time and want to work with you all the time because they enjoy working with the brand. And I think specifically for, your podcast, I think there's a really special moment of, there's a lot of creators that are really big within their own small networks, and kind of finding those other people and then just connecting with them, sending them a DM saying hey, I think this is really cool, you'll realize how much other people are down to collaborate with you, or come on up your podcast and be a guest by doing that. And we see this with the other influencers we work with for webinars and our organic social, but then being able to share their audience and introduce what you're doing with their audience,
Mm,
because now you've already kind of made that connection with them. And
mm-hmm.
you can kind of assume that their audience would be probably likely a little bit similar. So it's likely that they'd be interested in what you're doing. So just kind of getting those specific things up front, how you want your message to come across, what you're looking to kind of achieve first. And then from there, you can kind of put in like the actual steps and action plans of like
Right.
how you need to execute that.
Right.
Yeah.
So what I'm kind of hearing is that really focus on the audience and who makes sense within that audience. So in my world with this podcast, you'll probably just be people who drink alcohol and marketers by the sound of things.
I say a lot of people in advertising and creative, that's what they do though. So, there you go.
So yeah, I think the market is there, hopefully. And yeah, and creators. So this is why I ask is, I think, it's important to establish almost like a little community, whether that's within Slack or LinkedIn or so on, where people know that you have a podcast or a piece of content. Because like you said, for me, it's, if I was invited onto a podcast, it's almost free content for me in a way. So I want to, I suppose, try and get that message across that I'm giving the possibility of content to people, and doing these collaborations. So
And then and the great thing about like what you're doing, I think too, is because every guest it offers a different perspective and like a new, like learning something or a relatable moment. And that's what I feel like has been a big theme, but has been something that we see more, especially like with, TikTok is like taken over, but everything is a little bit more like, besides trendy things, like educational focus. Like I'm going there to learn like recipes and how to clean stuff and like how to organize like my closet now, like instead of like going to Google or YouTube. But I would just say, like, even just like relatable and inspirational content, I feel like is the thing that performs the best. So just like once you kind of understand, and of course, rooting that in what you want to do and the message that you actually want to get out there with what you're doing, but then like just finding those moments that would be relatable and inspirational for your audience.
Yeah, and like you mentioned, educational, right? You want people to learn something, hopefully from what you're putting out, and I suppose that's a hook to bring them back. Okay,
Yeah.
so I've got some ideas now of how I can start with a kind of an influencer, or like combine with influential people for the podcast. So thank you. Awesome.
Yeah, of course.
Okay, and so we've got a question about ROI, and so with a couple of shots in, it's difficult maybe to talk about numbers and kind of ROI led things. So how do you understand like ROI from influencers? Because I know this is kind of going back to the first question that we spoke about. Like how do you see, or how do you win over leadership with a strategy like that? So what would you say, like in terms of return on investment, how is it done? What systems do you need to put in place in order to check and see return on investment?
Yes, the fun old measurement piece. So I would say at first, like set expectations, like first and foremost, like before going like in with anything, like really, I would say like, again, like based on like what you have put together, just really, I would say I always try to be as transparent and like set expectations with what I'm putting forward, especially if, it might not be something that would be maybe necessarily my first option or choice, but kind of one of those things that like business wise, we kind of have to hit on. So finding a way to make it cute, if you will. But measurement. So you'll always have those vanity metrics, which I feel is like what influencer kind of started and thrived off of, which is what's the impression, like what's the actual unique eyeballs, what's the engagement rate, how many comments, how many likes, how many shares. But then more so like now relating that to lower funnel, which is what do conversions look like and what does that actual cost per acquisition look like through the influencer that I activated. So we of course are getting that like high level data just as far as anything directly that has come from the influencer, which is great. It gives us, again, like now we kind of have formulas. We know if a person has this size audience, like what the reach to audience ratio normally looks like, especially now with Instagram and even I think TikTok recently, like changing something with their views. So like a lot of people aren't necessarily seeing organic content, making it a lot harder for, creators to, find that content that's going to reach a lot of people organically. So, using tracking links, getting any conversion that they drove from their links or their promo codes directly. But that shows like a very, very small piece of the puzzle, because you're also expecting that, especially for a brand like Preply, where you're signing up and paying to learn a language, which means that there takes more like thought and actual commitment and wanting to commit to spending time to doing something. So you have to be very motivated at the time you're seeing that influencer's content. And if you're looking at Instagram, just scrolling your IG stories of, I'm not really interested in learning a language right now, like that was great. Now I know what it is and I'll probably think about it when I'm ready, but it's not something I'm swiping up and buying at that time. So I think that specifically for us in the service that we cater to, it is very tricky to just show impact based on the direct attribution that the influencer is showing. It gives us a good picture, but I would say not the full scope of things. So what we have done specifically is, okay, well, what does the non-direct measurement piece of influencer, what data points can we look at to give us a fuller picture of what that impact was? So, I mean, very simply, part of that is we look at exit poll survey results. So we've been able to like go and like source out of maybe 8,000 samples that we are, data points that we got. And we're only, I think, surveying 50% of the people that check out on Preply. So again, a smaller sample size. We've been able to kind of pull the top influencer mentions that we've worked with from those lists and have seen like, okay, we know we've worked with, influencer one, for example, she drove 20 direct customers, but then we get the exit poll surveys and her name came up 60 times. Like clearly we missed a lot of like people that she actually drove. And then we're able to go and see this person came from direct, this person came from maybe SEM or certain things like that, but they're mentioning the influencer as a reason why that they purchased the lesson. So that's kind of given us another data point as far as like, hey, out of the US influencers that we work with, only 40% is actually being directly attributed, because we're losing the 60% of people that if we didn't have the exit survey results, we wouldn't have known that they drove those as well. Then you get into another layer of like looking at, Google Analytics. What did the upticks look like during the certain times that influencer content went live? This is typically harder to do because, and a lot of, I'm sure, campaign and brand partnerships managers can relate. Like you always would love to plan for influencer content to go live within a certain period of time. But then you also have to remember these people are people.
Yes.
And shit happens.
Busy people.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's life. So there's always things that, we try to contractually include things as much as we can for timing. But at the end of the day, like we're humans, we're working with humans. So, but with content more spread out, sometimes it's harder to then gauge what that impact is, especially if there's paid campaigns running or if, SEO is doing a big, push or something like that. So we have now tried and successfully have done in Italy, which is doing like an influencer burst period where we had content go live within, I think like a week and a half. And then from there, working with the data team, we'll be able to kind of do this causal impact exercise that is really like taking a 360 view from like all of the ways that we're tracking, conversions and direct traffic to Preply, and then really be able to see what that magnified number is compared to what we directly attributed. And then hopefully with more examples that we do with that, we'll have a better idea of, okay, if we know this is how much directly was contributed by influencer, it's really times X and what that number looks like.
Wow. So there's so many pieces here that me as a content person as well is revealing to me, because the exit surveys is one very big one, because obviously you get the question with any kind of marketing, like, if you don't see direct attribution, how do you know it's effective? Well, that's one way of seeing that it's effective, because of course someone might go to a webinar or watch a live for 2 minutes or something like that. and then see an influencer post, and then see an ad on TV, and then go for a walk and see a billboard. So where, but the initial thing might have been the webinar or the influencer or the billboard. So yeah, that's it. Really, really important and an amazing way to track, to keep an eye on that.
And then I guess the only other thing that I didn't mention, because I'm like in Instagram, TikTok land, but YouTube also gives us a really cool another layer of insight, which is like the brand lift. So with the surveys that they're able to run on YouTube, we've seen like exponential growth. But of course, like you mentioned, some of those are post 14-day click, post 30-day click. So it could be who is that really attributed to when it comes down to when they actually saw the ad and when they converted. But when we look at like a cost per lifted user, and I think like that will be something else that we start to look at more when we just think about awareness. We've seen very low numbers with activating certain partners and on YouTube specifically. So I think that that's another really cool data point that, again, not many people care because they're like, oh, well, this probably came from here or something like that. But at the end of the day, there still is that big uptick, which I think is revealing
brand impact.
Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, amazing. I'm very impressed how you're able to talk about attribution after a couple of shots. That's very impressive.
I was gonna say, I feel like I got this down now with how much we're always talking and working on this.
Yeah,
it's like imprinted in my brain.
Yeah, exactly. I can see it. Okay, let's do one more shot, and then I have a segment on the show called Snapshots, which is like to get your snap judgment on a range of topics. Essentially, it's a quick fire round of questions, and just I need to get your opinion on a couple of things.
Sounds good.
Final shot, and then let's go for it.
Okay, cheers.
Cheers.
You're gonna sleep good tonight, Tom.
Okay, I'm getting used to the flavor now, kind of. Okay, so first, a time you've been starstruck, and it could be working with an influencer or just in daily life.
Oh, geez. This is probably President Obama. And didn't work with him, but through one of the brands that I worked with when I was based in Atlanta, I was able to go to a conference that he was the keynote speaker at, and by far probably like one of, I think, that would be it for me.
That I would be starstruck with that. Yeah. I would be. I can't believe I'm seeing this person in the flesh.
It was unreal, and you're just like, wow, like you're just and like listening to him talk. It was unreal to be there in person too. So that was really cool.
Amazing. Brilliant experience. Okay. Most fun thing about working with creators?
Fun things. So, I mean, I was going to say in general, like I've met so many people that have like become friends just from doing. I think that's what I love doing. I would say fun things would be to like get the behind the scenes of like what they're posting kind of thing, just like daily life. Like you see something that they posted and then, you like get on the phone with them or you're talking to them and they have like some crazy story about what like wasn't captured or what really happened, and just kind of getting like the fuller context of some of their moments that people probably see and are like, oh, that's so great, or it's so well like put together and stuff like that. And it's like, oh, if you only knew the backstory kind of thing. I think like that.
The sweat and frustration and hard work and blood and everything.
Just like I would say that probably.
And the most difficult thing about working with creators?
Difficult. I wouldn't say that it's necessarily something difficult, but there are still some people, and I would say it's getting better, but one, like working with someone's agent, like is always kind of more of a pain in the butt. Like you'll always hear people saying like, love working with influencers who aren't with an agency, but I have found, recently that sometimes it is more helpful. But then I would just say the ones that aren't really invested in the partnership like that. And it shows as far as like, I don't want to have to give you a script. I want you to actually like be able to bring your thought into like how you envision this, like, your channel, your audience best. So more so like influencers being difficult versus like one difficult moment, if that makes sense, that they have.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. And do you, I'm going to put you on the spot with this one. Do you remember the last time you bought something because an influencer advertised it?
Oh yeah. I mean, geez, what did I just get on TikTok the other day? From TikTok is terrible. Like I'm really one of those people that like I go on TikTok and I buy like 5 things that I just saw. I mean, probably like the kitchen organizers, like she's like one of the girls that always shows up. Like I'm probably saying her name wrong, Callie or Kaylee May or something like that. She does all like the ASMR, like organizing her guest bathroom, and of course they're like restocking with like the full of Target like products. And I'm like, I don't know how you can pay to restock your guest bathroom this often, but like stuff like that. Yeah.
So bathroom organization equipment.
And for like kitchens, like the clear plastic things that you can put in your kitchen just to take out of the box that they come into. Like, I hate to say that I'm one of those persons that did that.
Wow. So so if we to look into your TikTok following, 70% of it would be bathroom and kitchen organization equipment.
Or like styling your home. Like I'm really into like the
Right.
interior design, like because I'm still like trying to get my place together. So I like looking at other things for inspo.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Brilliant. And what about where you look for inspiration? Could be work related or not.
Yeah. I would say like detaching, if that, or unplugging, if you will. Like I get a lot of my kind of revamps and like refreshes and stuff like that and new ideas when I'm outdoors. So like that could literally be anything, like going for a walk, going for a run, going to the beach, going for a hike, going to the park, like just being like in nature, I would say is like a refresh for me. But in terms of like or physical or tangible ish things, like I love listening to certain like podcasts too for inspiration, or reading like actually, just certain books and things like that. Like it could be on nothing that I'm specifically working on, but just have me like have a different perspective on something. And I would say and tapping back into my network of people that I've worked with in the past. Like I just, hearing what other people are doing or what new projects are they have going on, or talking to my friends that I was at the agency with that are now at somewhere else, and seeing how they're doing things. And I think that that's just a great way to kind of just overall see, like, and keep your pulse on what's happening in the industry on both creator side and people that are in agency and brand life.
Wow. Yeah, that's really interesting to have those connections where you can learn where you're in the same industry and you're learning from each other is really powerful.
Yeah.
So yeah, brilliant. And what podcast would you say were some of your favorites?
I gotta open my podcast. I'm terrible. I never remember the names to things. I really gotta do like better at that. I mean,
what style? Is it kitchen and bathroom interior, or
no? Like I'm more listening to like Freakonomics Radio is one, or like
that's brilliant.
Everything, like just weird, like things that are just like, things you should know, or random stories from people that did certain things. Like more so, I guess, hearing other people's stories and like on or opinions on certain things, I guess, if you will. Just I like to just like learn random shit that I didn't really know about or have thought of, kind of. So that's where I try to find those outlets. Yeah,
it's a powerful way to get inspired, I guess. Is everything. I had a conversation in the last podcast with Nigel Stevens, and he was saying, I asked him the same question, and he said, everything but related to work inspires me to do something with work, so it might be he reads something about history or war or something like that, and that can inspire him for work. And one word to describe this show.
One word. Geez, that's so much pressure. I would say, let me say, okay, one word to describe this show.
What's like, or it could be multiple words.
I'm trying to, like, basically, like, hanging out with your friends. Like I can't think of that, but it's very much like enjoyable. Can that be my word, I guess?
Hello?
Oh wait, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah.
Say again.
I was saying like I like that it's like it feels like you're just hanging out with like, hanging out with my friend, like talking about stuff that we're interested in. So I guess summarizing that could be enjoyable. The show
Awesome.
my word for the show would be enjoyable.
I'm glad. Thank you. All right. So that was it in a nutshell. That was it. I'm feeling quite merry after those 3 shots. I feel good. I feel like I need to go for a bit of a walk.
Yeah.
I'll be honest. The last part is just a bit of a call to action. So if you want to close the podcast up, that's fine. No, I'm kidding. Please subscribe wherever you're listening to this. And if you go to idea-shots.com, it's in the description of this podcast. You'll get notified about the next podcast as well. And feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. Again, it's in the description. And let me know how I'm doing with these. And last thing to say is, Daniella, thank you so much for this conversation. I had so much fun. I learned a lot. So I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. Thanks